So I have a wonderful guest today. I'm thrilled to introduce to my audience here. And my name is Medina from Arise Humanity on YouTube and Soul Family on Rumble. We have a wonderful guest called Diana Dirkby today, and Diana has had a very interesting life. She has had challenges to deal with in her life that she's going to chat about, but she has had a very, very full and interesting life. And she's just written a book, which I think is a really interesting perspective on schizophrenia and helping people to understand mental health issues. And I think that, when we discuss these things, Diana, it allows people to really build a sense of inner standing and compassion and empathy for our journeys. When people hear about these different journeys of things like schizophrenia, and I'm really thrilled to interview you on this topic as well, because I haven't told you yet, Diana, but my mother was a psychiatric social worker. She was the head of the social work department in a psychiatric institution in Melbourne. So I do have some sort of inner standing and connection, I guess, to the world of mental health. And so this will, for me, be very interesting as well, as I've always been fascinated by the whole topic of, how the world deals with different types of people, and also really sharing that you've had a really full and interesting life with the journey of schizophrenia as well. So, Dana, big welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us here. And I'd love to hear about your journey, first of all, about where you started and where you're living now. You've got your Alaska lights behind you there on the screen, which indicates it's a clue for everyone that you are living in Alaska now. However, you were born in Australia and grew up in your earlier days in Australia. So please share with us your journey, Diana.
Briefly, what happened was I was born and raised in Australia until I graduated from the University of Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at that time living alone with my mother because my parents had got divorced and my brother had gone to England to study music.
Right.
And at that time at the University of Sydney, in theoretical mathematics, which is what I was doing, there wasn't really any opportunity for graduate study.
Mm-hmm.
And so they recommended that you go overseas.
Right. Wow.
So I made a round of applications and I ended up getting a positive response from England and from France. And I chose the one in England because my thesis advisor, who was going to help me get my PhD thesis, I had met before in Australia.
Right.
And I had done a project for him. So I knew he was a really nice guy and that he was reasonable, So, and of course, there's the language thing.
Yes.
So my French was pretty good because I'd done it in high school, but my mother's French wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to England thinking she'd live with me, and she chose to live with my brother,
Right.
which of course was okay.
Yeah.
So they lived in London, and I went to Nottingham. And I don't want to make the story too long, but I got the PhD in a few years, and it was a very bad time at that moment for getting jobs in England.
Right.
So I knew some mathematicians in France, and I applied in France and was successful in getting a research position at the National Centre of Science Research in France.
Mm-hmm.
So, as to what my mother was doing, she was sticking with my brother. Now, in the fiction novel that I've written, there's no brother in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is manyfold. And this is why I wrote a fiction novel and not a memoir, because he wouldn't want to be in the novel,
I
if you
understand.
get what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we have a totally different view on the family dynamics, and uh, it's just easier to leave him out. Um, I mean, he's developed into being a very nice man, and he has a lovely family and a happy life. And I have no interest in going back to what happened when we were much younger and disputing it.
Sure. And that's the thing when you write a book, isn't it? Because if it's based on some sort of autobiographical level, you've got to, I guess, consider the feelings of the people around you as well, so that you want to share your journey, but you also don't want to create, sort of conflict or problems with other people when you bring them in. So it's an interesting thing to think about if you're writing a book about your life.
Yes, and also it gives you a lot of artistic freedom.
Yes.
So, almost everything in the book comes from somewhere in my mother's life or my life, but I've been able to kind of develop some of the characters within the fiction context so that they're more interesting, and maybe they do things in the book that I can't really prove that they had done, but it makes for a very interesting story. So I'll give you an example. Both my parents were very good friends with the famous Australian poet Roland Robinson. Now, he's deceased, but he was very, very famous when he was alive. And his main thing was going around to all of the Aboriginal communities to try to save their language. So
Oh,
he was totally obsessed uh, with language because he was a poet,
mhm.
and he realized that as these communities died out or assimilated, one of the things that they lose is language.
Yeah. Well, they were
And
told to not speak, on when they had the children living on the reserves, when they were taken away from their parents and things, they were told not to speak their traditional languages as well.
right, and
Mm,
so he went around recording as much as he could,
mm.
and he became very close to my mother, and there was a little bit of ambiguity when I was growing up as to how close was close.
Yes, yes.
And my parents used to argue about it. So I've been able to use that to kind of make a human interest story within the novel.
Also been
Yeah.
experiencing paranoid schizophrenia as well, on her journey.
Yes.
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 Mm.
Yes. So of course the book is mainly about paranoid schizophrenia, but one of the things that it's very important to remember is that if you live with a mental illness, that is only part of you. You have this battle with your severe mental illness. It takes up a lot of your life. You lose a lot of friends and family because of it, and so on. But there are aspects of your intellect and of your hobbies and so on that have nothing to do with your mental illness. And so I wanted to put in the book a lot of stuff about my mother and about me that wasn't just the mental illness.
Absolutely. I mean, it's incredible. You've had such a rich life. You've achieved a PhD. You've lived around the world. You're now living in Alaska. You've had a fantastic life. So I think it's really important to highlight that maybe even could you say that schizophrenia has been allowed you to see the world in a way that has perhaps opened up other skills you wouldn't have had if you didn't have that.
Right. Now, as regards the writing, I had always wanted to be a writer.
Right.
So when I was very young, I wrote a lot of poetry. And both my parents said, look, this is a really difficult area. Even their friend Roland Robinson, who had become so famous, had difficulty making a living.
Yeah.
And I was at the same time getting very good grades in mathematics. So they said, with mathematics, you can do so much more. You can do a technical job or you can teach. And they discouraged me from continuing with writing. So I became a mathematician. But what I discovered, because I did theoretical mathematics and now I'm getting a bit technical, is it's really like creative writing.
Oh, okay.
Because you have a mathematical problem which is open, as we say in mathematics, which no one knows how to solve. And then you get a good idea to solve it. That idea works. And then you have to write a paper.
Okay. Yeah.
And that paper is creative writing, but not of the sort that you're used to.
Oh,
But
that's a
it's
very different way of
still,
looking at it.
yeah, but you still have to get your point across to many people
Yeah.
who may know nothing when they start to read your paper. So
Sure.
you have an introduction, and then you have a statement of the main theorem, you have the main parts of the proof, etc., etc., etc. So this, so I was actually doing some kind of writing, but I retired at the end of 2018 from Texas A&M, where I had a job, and decided that then I wanted to do the writing that I'd always wanted to do,
Fantastic.
which is not the mathematical writing, but the writing that I'm doing now.
Well, I guess the number one thing on the list was to share your journey, which is your beautiful book, The Overlife, A Tale of Schizophrenia, which is the cover here behind me. And
Yeah, you've done a great
available
job.
on, thank you. It's available on Amazon. We've got the links below. So tell us a bit more about the evolution of this book and how long did it take you to write, for example?
Not very long,
Okay.
couple of months. Yeah,
Gosh.
yeah. But that's, I think, a little bit my training. In mathematics, we usually take a couple of weeks to write a paper. So,
Mhm.
and also I had a lot of the material already in note form,
Mhm.
because during my struggle with schizophrenia, I wrote many, many pages of notes for my doctors about what I was going through.
Right.
Because even if your doctors are trying to help you, schizophrenia is still a very slippery disease.
Mm. Mm.
And it has taken them a long, long time to find the correct dosage of my medication and the correct advice to give me as to my lifestyle. Because lifestyle is a big factor, because stress is a big trigger for schizophrenia. And so the only way I could find to communicate with them was to document.
Right. Yeah.
So the character Sarah, who's the narrator of the novel, who, unlike her mother, wants to find a solution as to why she's going through what she's going through. I mean, the mother is in denial, but the daughter wants to know. And I had my notes to work from.
Right.
Now, the story of my mother, I really wrote the book for my mother, because I've had difficulties in my life with people because of my schizophrenia. I've had heartbreak, disappointments, feelings of rejection. But what my mother went through was far worse, because she couldn't accept that she had a mental illness.
Okay. That's fascinating. Uh, and so therefore that made her life more challenging.
Much more challenging. And there's even a word for this. It's called anosognosia, and it's recognized as an inbuilt inability to face that you have a severe mental illness. So this word anosognosia has come to mean this, and that's basically what she had. But she also had all the stigma inherited from her generation. I mean, she was born in 1927, and her father was born in 1894, and her mother was born in 1884.
Oh,
So they had her very late. And I'm no youngster. So she also, like me, had epilepsy.
yeah.
So I also have absence epilepsy, and so did she.
Mhm.
And she was self-conscious about that also.
So did the journey of writing the book, um, when she read it, did that help?
She hasn't read it
It
because
hasn't.
she's deceased.
Oh,
She's deceased. Yeah, no, she died. Like the character in the book, the mother, she died of ovarian cancer when she was 65,
okay, okay.
and that was in 1992. So she hasn't read it, and my father is deceased, and my brother wouldn't want to read it.
So if she was here and she had the opportunity to read it, what do you think she would get from it?
Just how much appreciation I had of her.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's what the book is really about. I mean, the book, of course, is about, I want to tell people about what the symptoms of schizophrenia are really like when you forget about being polite and nice and you just tell it. And that's the narrator, Sarah, in the novel, the daughter character. That's what she's doing, and that's me. That's what I've been through.
Well, yes, you sound
But
like you're very direct, to the point, and clear, which would be great because then people would really understand the journey because you'd be able to express that really well.
right,
Yeah.
but it hasn't always gone down well with people, and I've had a lot of disappointment. And unfortunately, and anyone with schizophrenia will tell you this, or another severe mental illness. Some people, as soon as they hear that you have a severe mental illness, they don't want to know you anymore.
Right, right.
Instead of wanting to know more so that they know how they can be your friend or remain a sympathetic family member, they just find it easier to cut you out.
Sure, sure.
And, in
Mm.
my blogs and so on that I've gone on to write, which will all be on the new website when it comes out, um, I've tried to tell people that sometimes there's just nothing you can do.
Yes,
If you have a friend who rejects you or a family member who rejects you, uh, you know, it becomes pretty obvious early on that they don't want to learn.
yes, they're
And
not.
so, you're really wasting your time. And it could be that you have someone else uh, who is not at that moment as close to you, but they want to learn. They want to find out more about it. And they want to be your friend or your family member and just be a little bit more informed. And I've had that happen to me too. So,
Yes. Well,
um,
there's a famous saying, and it's rejection is God's protection. A friend of mine says that often, so that, if you have someone reject you, it's actually a gift because they're telling you that it's not worth you putting your energy and time into that relationship, and that energy and time will be far better spent put elsewhere into someone who is open to, being with you and connecting with you. So
right.
it's a gift.
So, getting back to the book, I really wrote it in honor of my mother
Yeah.
because she was this incredible person. I mean, she was a genius in my view. And in the early part of my life, she was a very good mother. The problems really began when I was about age 8, just as they do for Sarah in the novel. But she was an incredible person. And because of her bad marriage and the way she was treated by people and her inability to face that she had a mental illness, her life ended very badly.
And I also think back then there was a real lack of awareness about what this actually meant, and so
Yeah.
people would be scared of it because there wasn't the information out there that there is now. What would you share with us, perhaps, what these beautiful gifts were of your mother's? What were these amazing gifts of her genius?
Well, I mean, she had an incredible intellect. So she as was typical of girls of her class, they were upper middle class, her parents in Australia at that time. Girls left before they finished high school and waited around to get married.
Yeah.
But her father had a very interesting history. He was a Jewish refugee who lost his parents and was put into very bad foster care. And at age 14, he left that foster care with being very driven to educate himself and rise up socially. And so there were three daughters, and the three daughters, there aren't three in the novel, there's two in the novel. But there were three daughters, of which my mother was the youngest. And he made sure that they had an excellent education at home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they had the school education. He sent them to fancy school, so they had that. And then at home, they had a lot of extra education, things like piano teachers and tutors and stuff like that. So my mother was very intellectually advanced, and my father was very, very clever, but he was a good time guy. He hadn't had that background, he liked much more. I don't want to say mundane, but he was much more someone who liked a good night out and having a few drinks than this kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
But he did love jazz. I mean, he wasn't completely without a musical bone in his body. He did love jazz. He played it quite well on the piano, but he didn't worry about sharing it with his children.
Okay. Yeah.
But my mother was really a force to be reckoned with when my brother and I were growing up, as to passing on to us what was good manners, classical music. She made my brother read all the Russian authors, like Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, and so on.
Yeah.
She gave me books on philosophy by Plato and all this kind of stuff when I was 11. So, I mean, she really, it sounds snobby, but it wasn't, because she wasn't a snobby person.
Right.
It was just that she had this passion for sharing.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
And so neither of my parents knew anything about mathematics, and they couldn't help me with my math homework. So I think that's also another reason I eventually chose mathematics, because I thought I had my privacy.
Right. Yeah.
But
It's your own journey. It's something for you.
Yeah, right. That something they couldn't do. So, but I did continue, to learn languages, and then when I went to France, read novels there and so on and so forth. So she was really set, and she had a much, much closer contact with my brother.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons he's not in the book, because I didn't want the book to become this great memoir of my brother, who had a completely different reaction to my mother. He eventually rejected her. So, but she was totally responsible for his career in music.
Right, right.
She got him the clarinet, which is what he played, and she organized him to go to the Conservatorium High School in Sydney, and then to do studies at the Guildhall in London, with someone who gave him his job eventually. So she wasn't thinking much about me after I was maybe 10 or 11.
Okay.
But the momentum had been created. And so I just wanted to get out there that, there are people like my mother who go completely under the radar.
Yeah.
Because in her case, she's labeled as crazy. And actually, she did consult some doctors, and none of these doctors was competent enough to tell her she had schizophrenia.
Do you think if she'd been born later, she would have had a very different experience? But that was also,
I think so, yes.
Yeah, it was very much
I
part
think
of
so,
that
yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of the era, and part of Australia in that era. And but it's really a testimony to her.
Right, beautiful.
Because I'm the only one in the family who remained in love with her.
Right, right.
And considering what she was, that's a terrible shame, except my husband. So I married very late. And the time I married my current husband, who's my only husband, my mother was dead.
Okay.
But my husband has fallen in love with my mother from what I've told him about her.
Oh, lovely.
And when I married him, his mother was dead. And she was in a similar situation. She was a single mother who was a coin changer in the subway in New York, which is humble.
Yeah.
Okay. And she still brought up a little boy to become a mathematics professor like me.
Oh, you know, and also
So,
being a single mother back then, not having the support systems that are in place. I mean, you know, that of course we know now that the whole way society is set up, it doesn't serve the marginalized population at all. It's really
right,
set up more for the elite to support them. But
right.
regardless, it was probably worse back then as well than it is now, and it's not good now either. But yeah, it's very interesting that what single mums would have had to go through at that time, uh, you know, with kids. Huge, absolutely huge effort to be able to support kids and go through those experiences, I think.
Right. Now, to get to talk about schizophrenia a little bit, I mean, the easiest way to understand it is that it's a loss of touch with what is real.
Okay.
And this is the aspect of it also which frightens people because, symptoms can be things like hearing things
Voices, yeah.
that, yeah, hearing or just hearing things, not necessarily voices, but hearing things which are not there, seeing things which are not there, but especially believing things which are totally false.
Okay.
And in my case, because I have paranoid schizophrenia, when I'm sick, having very exaggerated paranoia about how I'm being judged and what people want to do to me, and so on and so forth. And so I go to a great deal of trouble in the novel to describe these symptoms so people understand exactly what they are. And I don't make any attempt to soften the blow.
And how often do these episodes of the paranoid schizophrenia, how often have they happened? Were they a regular thing?
They were a regular thing while I was working. Now that I'm retired, it's been stable.
You might. Okay, yes.
It's been stable, but I don't think it was the job so much as my psychiatrist eventually decided to put me on a mammoth dose of antipsychotics. And whenever I tell any other of my doctors what I take, they just say, we couldn't get through the day with that. I mean, we'd be just asleep. And my psychiatrist has come to the conclusion that I metabolize the drugs very quickly. Okay. And so even though they're an extended release version of the drugs, I'm kind of running out, at some point in the day. So she's upped it, and she's also put me on a tranquilizer. And I also take pills for epilepsy.
Yeah.
But I think what was the biggest help was two things. Well, first of all, as a retired person, I have a lot more flexibility over what I do. And one of the main triggers of schizophrenia, people don't realize, is stress.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can be stressed for really silly reasons. And, I'm still learning because I'm a kind of go, go, go person. I'm still learning when I have to switch off for the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now having a husband really helps because if I switch off, it means he's getting attention.
How long have you been married?
So
How long?
we've been married 24 years.
Oh, well done. Congratulations. These
Yeah,
days, that's a
and
relative.
he's a wonderful husband for someone with schizophrenia. I
Oh,
mean, he's calm and he loves me so much. And of course, that has helped. But also knowing myself, I mean, admitting that I need the drugs, even though they have side effects, and admitting that, I can't do a mammoth amount of things in one day.
sure.
I have to restrict it. And the formula I have now is that I usually wake up very early, and that's been since I was a little kid.
Mhm.
I kind of switch off around 3 in the afternoon.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Well, that's like
that
half
means,
of the world after lunch. They lie down, in Europe, they have a
yeah,
nap after lunch. So, same.
yeah. And so, and then I've got some hours, with my husband, which he appreciates, where, we'll watch baseball or we'll watch a movie or whatever. And it's a combination of medication and lifestyle. But, the symptoms really are very severe. So if you misjudge and somehow you get into a relapse, then you really suffer.
Sure.
And I think I bring that out in the chapters on Sarah when she's under relapse.
So
I mean,
the book will sort of share with people the journey of schizophrenia and what you've had to deal with this journey. And do you think that it allows people to have more of a understanding or a compassion for the journey that you've taken?
I think so. And I chose in the book um, not to make myself a successful mathematician, which I was. I was a successful mathematician. I'm not a genius or Nobel Prize winner or whatever, but I had my career was successful. I've chosen instead to make Sarah, the narrator of the book, someone who ends up on unemployment benefits together with the windfall that she gets because her grandfather leaves her money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I did that because I get a little bit tired of many of the mental health advocacy groups and also the people who do wonderful work. I mean, they're activists for schizophrenia and so on, but they're always saying that someone with schizophrenia can do anything that
Okay.
anybody else can do. And this is simply not true.
Well, I mean,
This is simply not always true. This is simply not always true. It
sure.
may be true, but it's simply not always true. And I was diagnosed very late with my schizophrenia, but most people are diagnosed much younger. And the diagnosis comes when the young person is still with their parents and they're doing very, very well with something. Say they may be a musician or they may be doing very, very well at school. And suddenly it all goes south.
Oh, yeah.
And they go to a doctor, and the doctor says, I'm sorry, but your child has schizophrenia. And this is treated as a great tragedy.
Yeah.
And this is the meaning of my word, the overlife that I use is that, yes, it's big. It's big, big news. And, the parents have to do everything they can to support their child and learn about it. But it's not the end of the life of the person.
Well, you're a
And it's not,
testimony to that.
yeah, and it's not even the end of them being successful and happy. They may just have to be successful and happy in a different way to what their parents had envisaged.
Yes. Yes.
And often, these young people, because I've spoken a lot with people whose siblings have schizophrenia. And, they say things like, oh, yes, as soon as he turned 15 or 16, um, uh, you know, he became a total failure.
Right.
And,
Do you think that could be part of the diagnosis? So when when they're told, you know, you've got schizophrenia, then they think, okay, that's it. I can't do anything anymore. My life's, you know, going to be a mess. That's it. And then they sort of give up because they've got this like an indictment over them. Do you think that that's
Well,
what
I think that's, you know, there's a lot of people now on social media, and there are mental health advocacy groups that are out there trying to tell them that this is absolutely not the situation. And there are even support groups and so on where they can go and talk with people with a similar experience. The criticism I'm making is that you are not the same with schizophrenia as you would be without schizophrenia.
Yeah.
It's a big factor. And if you try to run away from the fact that it's a big factor, you just put yourself under pressure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's better to say, yeah, I'm going to have an overlife. So overlife, it's a noun I made from the word overlive, which means to survive a person or to survive a bad event. You can have a great life afterwards, but you have to work with the facts. You have to be realistic.
Yeah, totally. So,
yeah, go on.
It's like a person in a wheelchair, and you know, you don't say, "Oh, well, I can walk. I'm really mobile," because you're not. You're in a wheelchair, so you sort of got to address the fact that you're in a wheelchair in order to move forward. You know what I mean?
That's a very good analogy. And another thing people don't realize is that there are as many schizophrenias as there are schizophrenics. Everyone with schizophrenia experiences it in a different way because it has a lot to do with the mind.
Yeah.
And so, and it's unfortunately what happens, and this is one of the really scary parts, is, at least in my case, is you find yourself reinterpreting past experiences.
Yeah.
And looking at them from a more paranoid way.
Sure.
You know, like that person was always against me. Why didn't I see it at the time?
Sure. Sure.
When that person's totally forgotten you, you know, I mean, you know, it isn't even a relevant thought.
Yeah.
But people's life experiences is different. So the paranoia that they build up won't be the same as the paranoia that someone else builds up. So I'll give you an example of that. I don't know if you know the movie that Russell Crowe starred in called A Beautiful Mind.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Great movie.
So that was about John Nash.
Mm.
And my husband and I knew John Nash quite well. Now, the reason is that we're both mathematicians. He was at the University of Princeton, and my husband lived in Princeton for many years. He raised his children there.
Yeah.
And John Nash used to like to talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
So he'd often talk to John Nash. And John Nash, and I don't know why, this is just a mystery. I was in Princeton, you know, because I wanted to see my future husband, you know, and for mathematical reasons. And he always wanted to have lunch with me in the cafeteria. And I never knew why.
Are you saying that John Nash wanted to?
Yeah.
Oh,
and I never knew why.
Oh, okay.
I never knew why.
Ah.
And he was the same with my husband. He always wanted to talk to my husband, Marvin.
He must have felt an affinity
at tea. Yeah, or comfortable, I think.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, comfortable, I think.
So tell us about John Nash. That's fascinating. What was he like as a person?
And then so in one of his interviews, he said, you know, during one of his bouts of a relapse of his schizophrenia, he thought he was the king of Antarctica.
Yeah.
And he was totally convinced that he was the king of Antarctica. Now, this doesn't get into the film. And what he said about the film was that it didn't really portray exactly what he experiences.
Yeah.
From schizophrenia, but he thought it let the audience understand well.
So it was more of a whitewashed version of what schizophrenia.
Yeah, but he thought that it was better like that. Now, unfortunately, he died in a car accident not so long ago.
Oh.
He went overseas to get a prize, and you know, he's a very brilliant man, just getting prizes all over the place. And his wife, he and his wife got a taxi from the airport, and they were in the back seat, and they didn't put their seatbelts on.
Oh.
And there was a collision, and John Nash and his wife both went through the front windscreen and were both killed instantly.
Oh,
So this happened some years ago.
interesting that they went together as well.
Yeah, yeah. So and he has a son with schizophrenia.
Okay, yes.
Because it is a hereditary thing. I don't know if they really understand the genetics of it, but definitely if there's schizophrenia in the family, you have a elevated chance of
Yes,
having it yourself. Yeah.
yes. Have you ever sort of looked at the metaphysical or the spiritual aspect of it? Has that been something, because there's different opinions on that of what schizophrenia means. Have you ever
Yeah, well, both my parents were very left wing, at least at the beginning of their marriage. And the reason for that is that after World War II in Australia, and also because the conditions of a lot of working people were very bad, a lot of people in the artistic circles were just out and out communists. And
communist?
my mother,
Did you
as
say
I explained in
communist?
the book, communist, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And my mother in the book, it's absolutely true what I say. She was in the ballet, and she went to Sydney actually to study ballet from a White Russian, but and my father was hanging around with criminals and artists and anyone he could have a good time with and have a few drinks with. And so, as they were all communist, he was communist too. And my mother actually lost a job for bringing a communist paper to work,
Mm,
something she was very proud of, by the way.
mm.
So after they married, and the situation with the unions got better, and World War II got further away, my mother mellowed her views a lot.
Yeah.
But my father never did.
Mm-hmm.
He died a communist, and the country he admired the most was China.
Yeah.
And there was nothing you could do to talk him out of it. That was
Sure.
just, I mean, he'd been to China in World War II. He'd fallen in love there. He wanted to bring a Chinese girl to Australia. She wouldn't come, but it's he never lost he never lost that identity. My mother became a lot more interested in being more mellow as she grew older. And
Sure.
don't forget that my father never left Australia, whereas my mother traveled to London, to France, and so she got much more of an input from people who were very, very different.
It broadens your
And
perspective, doesn't it? When you travel more,
yeah,
you meet more
yeah,
people, and I think it does help people
yeah.
to be able to do that. Yeah. Mm.
So so in my mother's family were three sisters, and they all had mental health problems.
Mm. Yeah.
As did my grandfather and grandmother, as did my grandfather and grandmother, so their parents. So all five of them had mental health problems. And the sister in the middle, so the one 4 years older than my mother, became a silent nun.
A silent nun. Wow.
A
Well, I
silent
guess
nun,
that
yeah,
was
in
her
Melbourne.
response to it as well. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Mm. Gosh, that
And
would be a journey, wouldn't it? I mean,
that was a journey, and she's mirrored in the character Beth in the novel.
mhm,
For myself, I'm very interested in beliefs, but in a very, very broad sense. I mean, I'm interested in religion and beliefs and what people believe. And it ranges from doing meditation sessions to reading their catechism. It's just very broad. I'm very, very interested in beliefs and but all of them. So I'm not really a religious person in that I would stick to one thing, right? But
sure.
what people believe and what carries them through their life psychologically because of that belief, that does interest me. And funnily enough, it seems to be something that's not touched by the schizophrenia.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I never have delusions of being Christ or the Mother Mary or anything like that. You know,
There is a narrative that, I've read about where it is said that, we deal with mental health issues and, schizophrenia and things in the Western world in a specific way, through the medical model, through pharmaceuticals, that sort of thing. But if you were, for example, brought up in an Indigenous society in South America and you were going through these sort of schizophrenic type episodes, they would see it as part of a spiritual journey where you were going through like across a bridge, and as you're going across the bridge, all the information overload comes in from all the different sources and all the different realms and the dimensions, and then you have to be able to navigate that. So often you'd have like a shaman that would help you through that period, over the bridge, across to the other side, and then you would integrate that and you would be able to be back to your sort of a normal way of functioning, and that would be something that you journey through, you get to the other side. But, there is that belief system that even though, for example, medication has allowed you to function and to be able to be in the world so successfully in the way that you have, it can stop people from journeying across to the bridge to the other side. What would you say about that?
Well, first of all, the medication isn't enough if my lifestyle conditions are too negative.
Yeah.
So I've had multiple relapses of schizophrenia where I have been on medication.
Yeah.
And what happens eventually, because you see, another thing which probably I should mention is that when you first go into a relapse of schizophrenia, you have no idea that you're going into a relapse.
Yeah. Okay.
You're unaware of it.
Mm.
You're unaware of it. It's only when, in my case, it's when something happens that's so bizarre that I question myself.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, by that stage, you may have scared a lot of people off.
Sure.
Even though you've done nothing violent and you haven't hurt them in any way, you haven't even been to their house, but they just heard about it. So then the conundrum of the psychiatrist is how much more medication should I add on to enable her to be objective?
Yeah.
Because what the medication does is it helps you to be objective. It doesn't actually cure the symptoms.
Yeah.
At least in my case.
Yeah.
It helps me to be objective. So I live with schizophrenia every day, but if my lifestyle and my medications are at the right level, I can be objective and make the good decisions.
Right. Well,
and of course, I have the help of a very honest husband who,
that's wonderful.
Who will tell me straight out if I'm not behaving normally. So
sure.
But I certainly believe that, yeah, if people, I mean, Westerners unfortunately are a little bit uptight about a lot of things. That people aren't in the East, and it's and just one example is that both in Australia and the United States, it's a real youth culture. So
it is.
If you get mentally ill when you're older, they're inclined to think, well, this is something that should have been sorted out when you were younger, if you were to have any chance. Whereas in the East, the older people are the ones with the wisdom, and the younger people look to them to guide them about many issues.
Which is so
and
important.
So instead of your life degrading over the years, until you become a fossil that no one wants to see, your worth increases over the years as you become someone sought after because of their accumulative knowledge.
Mm. Mm.
And because, you know, the way people treat you when you have schizophrenia is also a function of age. So they will write you off more if you're older than if you're younger.
Right. Yes. No, it's very sad the way Western society deals with the aging process. What would be a message that you would give to people about if, for example, they were experiencing symptoms of schizophrenia or some mental health issue and wondering how to deal with it? What would be a message that you would give to them?
Go straight to a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Find a psychologist, because that's also essential. A psychiatrist is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
I have both a psychologist and a psychiatrist. Well, a psychologist can't write, at least in this country, can't issue a prescription for medication.
Mm-hmm.
Only a psychiatrist can do that. But to go straight to a psychologist and a psychiatrist, but to try to get a recommendation, because there are lots of bad ones.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And I had that problem too, that I had some bad ones, and I'm going back many years now in my attempts to, I mean, I knew something was wrong and I was trying to find, I mean, I wasn't like one of these people trying to run away. I was trying to find out. And excuse me. And I did have some bad psychologists and psychiatrists. So you've got to try to find a good one. And one way is to ask friends. What I did to find the psychiatrist that I have in Houston is look in the Best Doctors book.
Mm-hmm. The
I
best.
don't know if there's such a book in Australia, but there's a Best Doctors book, and I just chose the one.
Is that in the
I
UK?
thought, you know, I don't know. No, it was in the USA.
Oh, okay, the USA. Yeah.
Yeah, in Houston, and she's still my doctor.
Mm-hmm.
But she hasn't been able to manage my schizophrenia all the time. I've had relapses even under her care, and there's had to be a whole talk about lifestyle and medication. And I also, by now, have a good psychologist, and I talk to her once a week. And I kind of had this little game with myself that if I feel the urge to talk about something that's going to either tense me up or tense my husband up, I say, I've only got to wait till Tuesday, because that's the day I talk to her.
Yeah.
And I can tell her.
Yes.
And also her email is open. So she says, if I need to tell her something, you know, I just can't hold it in. And
Oh,
she's
that's
happy
good.
to get an email.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
they're like management
And
strategies. Yeah.
right. But these are really good ones. And it took, you know, I wish I could say you'll find them right away, but it took me a long time to find a psychiatrist and a psychologist
Sure.
that suited me. But my advice would be, don't give up the quest. You know, if you have, you know, like when I went in France to one of the psychologists, you know, typical French, she was very Freudian, and she said, "You're not sleeping with enough boys." That was
Oh, that's great advice. Not. Was she being funny or was she serious?
no, she was quite serious.
That's that bohemian lifestyle.
Right.
That's funny.
You know, so you can get this. And then I had a psychiatrist in Texas who, you know, his idea of treatment was to see me once a week and not to talk about anything that was actually worrying me.
Yeah.
And then when I got a second opinion through this Best Doctors book doctor, he said I wasn't allowed to see him anymore.
Yeah.
Which felt like a rejection. It was, yeah. So it's not, you know, I don't want to give the impression that it's paradise, but you must find help from doctors and not be ashamed of it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And also not be ashamed that you live with schizophrenia. A lot of very worthwhile people live with schizophrenia. They're not necessarily famous, but one thing that is relatively new is that a lot of them have now begun to interact on social media
Mm,
where they feel a little bit safer.
sure.
And there are also now, I know in Australia, but there's nothing to stop someone on social media also researching the ones in America. There's a lot of mental health advocacy groups now.
Sure.
So, go to their support groups, meet people who
Yes.
are having the same struggles as you because you're not alone.
Which is why we're sharing this chat today as well. So
Yeah.
just to sort of finish up, we've been chatting for now, and that's fascinating. I could talk to you for a long time further, but just to get to the crux of things, what do you think are the gifts people will receive from reading this book of yours? What do you think are the main sort of takeaways that people will benefit from by reading the book?
Well, I listened to a masterclass. It's an app, masterclass by an African American author who has written many books. And he said, make sure you tell a story
Mm-hmm.
and you'll get a good story from the book.
Yes.
You will also get from the character, Sarah, the daughter character, a very honest, transparent look into what it's like to live with multiple relapses of schizophrenia. It may not be what everybody experiences who has schizophrenia, but it's very detailed and has many elements in it that are common to people with schizophrenia. And then the third thing I would say is to realize that people with a mental illness are not only their mental illness. I mean, my mother was a wonderful person.
Mm.
And the book, I try to show this in the book, and I try to show that so much of what I enjoy now as an adult was due to her education.
Yeah. Oh.
I have a happy marriage, and you know, my husband was totally inexperienced with mental illness when he married me, and he's handling it incredibly well.
Mm.
And there are other things in life that are not your mental illness, and that's what people are always talking about stigma, and I think that's where stigma is at its worst when it just writes you off as schizophrenic, bipolar, depressive, and don't want you in my life because I have a fine life. Thank you. And I don't want you messing it up.
Sure, sure. So,
So people need to realize that uh, there's a lot of subtlety there. And if they're really honest with themselves, I mean, are they not a little crazy in some way?
well,
You
yeah,
know?
I think sometimes eccentricity and craziness is a gift to the world because we don't want to all be cut out, robots all doing the same thing. We want uniqueness and, difference. It's really important.
Yeah.
So just to finish, Dinah, it's been a wonderful chat with you, and it's really opened up a lot of insight into your journey. And so my last question for you is tell us just briefly, what's it like living in Alaska? That would be fascinating because
Oh, yes.
quite a
So
journey. You
that's
lived
because
in,
of my husband. Yes, that's because of
yes,
my husband. Now, yeah,
yes,
we're dividing our time between Texas and Alaska. We were in Texas because I was employed. My husband got early retirement before I married him. So he has never worked while we've been married. He's about 15 years older than me. And I got a job when I came to America at Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas, and that's why we have a house down there.
mm-hmm.
But my husband has had a passion for Alaska since he brought his teenage daughter up here from his first marriage uh, to see it for the first time. And so the summers in Texas are brutal.
Oh, okay. So you
And
go to
they're
Alaska
brutally
then.
hot. Yeah. And so I said, why don't we get a little house? It's just a little house, very, very humble. A little house in Alaska. So you have at least that part of your dream.
Right. Okay.
And so what's happened is we're dividing our time between Texas and Alaska, trying to decide, I want to stay in Alaska, and what worries him is the medical attention is much better in Texas. So, but I just love it here in Alaska, and it's like Australia. It's very pretty. We're living in Homer, and it's on Catchmack Bay, so it reminds me a little bit of the Pittwater in Sydney.
Okay.
But instead of having hills, we have glaciers.
Oh, right.
And so it's a little bit more exaggerated than the scenery
Okay.
around Sydney, which is what I'm used to, because most of my life I was in New South Wales. So,
Sure. Is there a big population there? I imagine it's pretty small in Alaska.
well, we're in a town of 5,000.
Right. Yeah.
And Anchorage, I'm not quite sure Anchorage, which is the biggest city, maybe has 80,000.
Mhm.
Fairbanks has maybe 40,000. But Juneau is the capital, and that's rather small. But there are many, 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 many native villages. And the natives of Alaska were and are at an advantage when you compare them to the native Indians in the lower 48, as we call it, the rest of America, because the state was formed late
Yeah.
in the history of America.
Mhm.
And attitudes towards the indigenous population had advanced to the point where the indigenous population could say, yeah, you can come here and drill for oil, but we want something back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to have that respected. So they have all sorts of things like free medical and free schools. And, I don't say it's paradise for them, but they have been also allowed to maintain a lot of their traditional ways for
Fantastic.
hunting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and living off the land. They have a quota that they can have, which is enough to feed them.
Sure.
So it's
Mm.
yeah, that's a nice part of Alaska.
Very interesting. I know you love animals too. You shared with me that earlier, and
Yes,
I
I
love
do.
animals
Yeah.
too. What are the most beautiful animals there in Alaska that you've come across?
Well, the cutest of the bears, of course.
The bears. Oh, I love bears.
Yeah, but they're also dangerous. We have a family living. Uh, we have a little bit of land beside our house. We have a family living there, and they're inclined to show up when they smell the cooking.
What sort of bears are they?
They're black bears.
Black bears. Oh,
We also love the grizzlies, but they live further from the urban settlements. But the moose is very cute also,
the
and
moose.
especially when it's a moose and a calf.
Oh, they're
You know,
huge, aren't they, the moose? The absolute
yeah,
huge. You never
yeah.
see them in zoos here, so I've never actually seen one. But what's their sort of uh what what's their energy? Are they gentle moose? How do they come
They're
across?
gentle as long as you have nothing to do with their kids.
Right. Yeah,
So all these animals will make problems for you if you go anywhere near their kids.
sure. Fair enough.
But I think they're in the deer family. I think they're the largest member of the deer family.
Yeah,
And we have lots of birds, which is also nice,
gorgeous.
of all types. Yeah, and
Sure.
squirrels,
Yeah.
and rabbits, and they all seem to like. I mean, we didn't make a garden here because most of the gardens get raided by the moose, and also we want there to be more stuff for the moose to eat. So
Sure.
it's pretty wild. Yeah.
They're bigger than horses, aren't they, moose?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Quite a bit bigger.
They're
Yes.
very tall. They've got very long legs, and the reason is that it snows heavily in Alaska,
Yeah.
and so they've got to be able to move
Walk.
through the snow.
Yeah. Yeah. God's design.
Incredible.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's been so wonderful to chat with you, Diana.
It's wonderful to talk with you too, and be sure to send me an email, and so we can keep in touch.
Oh, that would be lovely. And I've got your email below if people want to contact you for any reason, or to sort of maybe share their journey, or if they've got a question that they want to ask. Diana's email is below, and also, of course, the link to your wonderful book, which I think can benefit a lot of people, The Overlife, A Tale of Schizophrenia, as well as being a wonderful read. So thank you so much, Diana. It's been a joy to chat with you. We'll keep in touch,
Me
and
too.
maybe later on we could maybe do another one. So thank you so
Yes.
much.
Okay.
It's
Thank
lovely.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.